Hello everyone, welcome to Byjus Exam Prep IAS. Today in this session we are going to have a discussion on the newspaper of 11th of May 2024. But before we begin, a quick reminder to all of you, if you are somebody who's preparing for the Civil Services Examination and specifically looking towards the next year's examination, then there is an important session that we are going to conduct for you tomorrow, that is on 12th of May at 11 a.m. in the morning. So please do attend this session and it will definitely help you in your preparation. So let's begin with the list of articles first for today. So these are the three articles that we are going to have a detailed discussion on. First is India backs Palestine's bid for full UN membership. So we'll discuss about what happened and also what are the advantages that Palestine gets when it gets a full membership. Then second news, again from international relations perspective, after 18 months, China sends ambassador to India. So again, we'll discuss some of the aspects of it and why this is also important for both these countries. And then the third article which we have on your editorial page today, Freshwater quest, the likely new gold hunt. So what exactly the article is, we'll discuss some of the details of it. Then from the prelims perspective, there are these two articles. The first one is industrial output slows to 4.9% in March. So we'll discuss about what is index of industrial output and everything related to it, production that is. And then folds and faults, something related to proteins, and we'll discuss some of the scientific aspects of this. So these are the articles to be discussed in today's news analysis. Let's begin with the first article. The first article is India backs Palestine's bid for full UN membership. So what did we see? We see that India has supported a resolution at the United Nations General Assembly which has advocated for Palestine's admission as a full member of the United States. Now, this resolution is something that was presented by the United Arab Emirates on behalf of the Arab group, and it received a total of 143 votes in favor, including India's vote as well, with 9 votes going against, and there were 25 absentees. 9 against and 25 absentees. Now, this resolution is something that affirms that Palestine meets the qualification for UN membership as has been stipulated in Article 4 of the UN Charter. Now, this is something that also urges the Security Council to favorably reconsider Palestine's membership status. The General Assembly, where the resolution was also passed, it also responded with a lot of applause following the vote. Now, this decision, it builds on also India's long-standing support for Palestine. India was one of the first non-Arab countries to recognize Palestine Liberation Organization back in 1974, and also the state of Palestine back in 1988. And additionally, what we see is, so just remember that historically that what we have seen is that both times in 1974 and 1988, India has recognized Palestine. So first time it was Palestine Liberation Organization, and then in 1988 we see that it recognized the state of Palestine. So that's why additionally when we look at India's perspective, India has always maintained diplomatic presence in Palestine territories as well. And also it moved its office from Gaza to Ramallah back in 2003. Now, an annex to this resolution, it has specified that starting from the 79th session of the General Assembly in September, Palestine will enjoy the additional rights such as being seated in alphabetical order among all the member states, or the right to speak on the behalf of groups, and also the eligibility for election to various different UN-based roles. Currently, Palestine is an observer state, and as an observer state, it lacks the ability to vote in the General Assembly or run for any of the positions within the UN organs. Now, in this context, what you should also understand something where we are going beyond what the article has said. What are the advantages for a country when it becomes a full member of the United Nations? So what you'll see is that becoming full member of the United States, it is something which offers a range of very significant advantages for any given country. So for example, the very first thing is about its sovereignty and recognition. Full membership is something that solidifies the state's sovereignty and international recognition. It is something that confirms the state's status as an equal participant in the global community altogether. So that's why it is something which is very, very crucial from the context of Palestine here, because it is something that helps. It is something that helps in regaining its sovereignty and international recognition. International recognition. And then after that, we also see that it gets voting rights. Full members have voting rights in the General Assembly. And this is something that allows them to influence the resolutions and decisions on all the global issues ranging from peace and security to economic and social matters. In all these things, a country will be able to vote. So that's why second thing is voting rights. A very, very crucial thing is voting rights. Then the third, this is eligibility for election. The member states, they can be elected to very important bodies within the UN system, such as, for example, let's say they can go for the Economic and Social Council or various other committees and commissions that are a part of the UN. And this is something that provides further opportunities to also influence some of the international policies and decisions as well. So that's why they become eligible. So this is eligibility for election into various UN bodies. Alright, so this is again something crucial. Then after that, what we see is that they also sometimes will get protection under international laws. Membership in the UN will always come with protection which is afforded by international law, and including, let's say, diplomatic immunity and the ability to participate in the decision-making process that defines the international laws. So that's why it is something that becomes crucial here, because they get protection under international laws. Then after that, at the same time, they also get their access to resources. The full members, they can access the technical assistance and the developmental aid from the UN agencies. And this is something that also includes support from organizations like the World Health Organization or the United Nations, you can say Education and Scientific and Cultural Organization, that is UNESCO, or UNDP. So they get access to all these resources, all these international resources as well. So this is also something which is very, very crucial in their context. So that's why they get the access to resources. And then also we see that the member states, they can also bring the disputes with all the other states in the international platforms, such as the International Court of Justice, for resolution based on international laws. So that's why it also helps in dispute resolution. Then after that, it also provides a global platform for issues. That membership is something that will provide a platform to also try and bring all the national issues to a global audience, and increasing the possibility of international support and intervention in any of these cases. So that's why it provides, more or less you can say, a global platform. So that's why when it gets these all access, I mean when it gets the full membership, there are all these advantages that will come to Palestine with the full membership. So that's why it is a very significant step in the recognition of Palestine in a much better manner, and resolution of the conflict that we see between Israel and Palestine. Now coming to the next article, after 18 months, China sends ambassador to India. Now what we basically see here in this context is that after a gap of 18 months with no Chinese ambassador in India, we have a new ambassador, and he is Zhu Feihong. Now when he basically has been appointed as the new ambassador, and he has taken over the role as the 17th Chinese ambassador to India. He arrived in Delhi and emphasized his commitment to also rejuvenating the bilateral exchanges and cooperation to foster a better, stable and healthy relationship between India and China. He also highlighted that the shared perspectives of President Xi Jinping in China and Prime Minister Narendra Modi here in India, viewing the countries as cooperative partners rather than competitors. This is something that is very, very crucial, that he cited that we have to be cooperative partners, all right, rather than competitors. So being cooperative partners rather than competitors. So that is basically what we see in this particular context, and that's why what he was saying is that we have to see each other as having these opportunities for development rather than looking at each other as a threat. And his appointment is something which is very significant, that because it follows a period of very strained relations due to the border disputes along the line of actual control. And this is something that started back in April 2020, which escalated into a very violent clash in June 2020, resulting in casualties on both the sides. And despite all these tensions, there is a mutual understanding, as expressed by the leaders of both the nations, that better relations is something that needs to be pursued. This is a stance that has also been reinforced by our Prime Minister Narendra Modi in a recent interview, where he had done an interview with Newsweek, where he also stressed the importance of resolving the border issues with China so that we can normalize the bilateral interactions. And that's why in this context we see that Zhu also expressed the optimism about working very closely with the Indian government and in various different sectors. For example, aiming to address the global challenges like climate change and economic recovery, thereby maybe enhancing the bilateral and the global stability in between India and China. So that's why global issues like climate change, economic recovery and stabilization on the international relations is something that will be sought by both the countries. Now here we are saying that there has been an absence of an ambassador for the last 18 odd months, which brings us to a question: what is the importance of an ambassador? Why do we need an ambassador? So let's try to understand some of the important aspects of this, of an ambassador, that why do we need him. Now the very first thing is that when it comes to the importance of an ambassador, what we have to understand is that they are primary channel through which formal diplomatic communications and negotiations are conducted between countries. And that's why they ensure that the policies and the views of their home country are accurately conveyed to the host nation. So that's why they help crucially in policy promotion. They are the ones who would advocate for the to advance their home country's interests abroad, where let's say in trade, in security, in cultural exchanges, or in environmental cooperation. In all these things, they can actually advance the home country's interests forward. and this is something which also involves maybe a lot of lobbying or negotiations or partnership development with the host country. So that's why they first, we see that they play an important role in policy promotion. They play an important role in policy promotion. Then apart from that, they also help in the protection of their nationals. Ambassadors would play a very crucial role in protecting the interests of their country's citizens who are living abroad. And that's why they provide assistance in the legal and emergency situations also to these citizens. So that's why they also help in protection of nationals. Now, another thing that we see is that in times of crisis, such as let's say a political upheaval or maybe natural disasters or conflicts, in these cases the ambassadors also coordinate their government's response, and very often they involve the evacuation of the nationals and negotiation for the peace and humanitarian assistance. So all these things will also be looked after by the ambassadors. So that's why they, in a manner you can say that they help in crisis management. They help in all these cases, so that's why they help in crisis management. So that's why crisis management could include natural disasters, right? It could be natural disasters or maybe conflicts that are happening in these areas. So in case of conflicts they would help, or maybe if there is a political upheaval, so there also they would help. So in all these cases we see that they help in crisis management. Then apart from that, they also help in the implementation of certain agreements. They would oversee the implementation of the treaties and agreements between their home country and the host nation. And that's why they ensure the compliance and resolving of the disputes that may arise between the countries. So that's why they also help in this context when it comes to the implementation of agreements. So implementation of agreements. So that's why just understand that they play a very important role in the context of relations between the home country and the host country. So that is why ambassadors have importance. Now coming to the editorial of the day, and this is Freshwater Quest, the likely new gold hunt. Now this article, it basically talks about the intriguing phenomena of the vast volumes of fresh water that are located under the sea. And this is something that was initially discovered by the US Geological Survey back in the 1960s off the coast of New Jersey in the US. Now, subsequent discoveries by teams from Vietnam and some of the other countries, they have also confirmed such findings in a global way, including also an underwater river that was discovered at the bottom of the Black Sea. Now, this river is something that was characterized very similar to the terrestrial rivers, and that's why it highlights the extensive presence of subsea fresh water. Now that's why this is very intriguing, that in this context it basically talks about how there are undersea fresh water. Now why is this important? When you look at the global water statistics, it shows that Earth's total water volume, out of Earth's total water volume, 97% or 97.5% to be exact is salt water, and only 2.5% is fresh water. Now out of this fresh water also, a mere just 0.3% is available on the surface, and this is something that indicates that a significant amount of fresh water is underground or beneath the ocean beds, right? So that's why only 0.3% fresh water is available on the surface. Majority being underground or under the ocean beds. Now, with freshwater resources which are depleting, nations are actually expected to also explore and exploit these kind of underwater resources, initially within their maritime zones and potentially also extending to the international waters which are governed by international laws. Now, this is where if you look at the legal framework which surrounds the oceanic exploration, primarily which is related to what we call as UN clause, United Nations Law of the Sea Convention of 1982, and then earlier the Geneva Convention back from 1956. So that's why this and the Geneva Convention of 1958. Now, when it comes to UN clause is something that supersedes the Geneva Convention among its signatories, and that's why it outlines the rights and the responsibilities for managing the ocean's resources, including the seabed and the subsoil beyond the national jurisdictions. Now, this area, which actually is referred to the area, is something which is considered to be a common heritage of the entire humankind, and it is intended for equitable use, including the future generations as well. But when we look at the legal complexities, so UN clause defines area as beyond the 200 nautical miles from the state's baseline where the resources are managed by the International Seabed Authority. So now in this particular scenario, what happens is that when we look at the legal complexities, essentially concerning the United States recognizes Geneva Convention, but it does not recognize UN clause. And that's why here another problem is when we look at the definition of resources, because definition of resources in UN clause, it includes all the mineral resources, but it does not explicitly mention fresh water. So that's why it is also something that leads to a potential legal ambiguity which is regarding this exploration of the undersea freshwater resources. So that is where the problem again lies, that when we look at the resources in this area, this resources, it's something that includes minerals, it includes minerals, but not underwater freshwater. That is the freshwater that lies underwater or under sea, oceans, etc. So that is where the problem lies, and that's why what we understand is that given the scarcity and the value of freshwater, international conflicts may eventually focus on these kind of resources. And that's why it is advocated for the establishment of clear legal frameworks to try and manage these resources substantially and sustainably, so that India, at least when it comes to India perhaps can lead the effort to resolve the legal ambiguities and promote a global cooperation. The ultimate goal here is to prioritize the sustainable management of water resources over more maybe speculative endeavors like extraterrestrial colonization and trying to find water on the moon and Mars, etc. The very first thing should be that when we look at the water presence that we have right here on the earth, they have to be first prioritized, and we have to see how exactly can we make the use of all that fresh water that is lying beneath. So we still have to see where exactly the things go, but overall it is something that becomes very, very crucial. Now coming to the prelims articles for the day, the first prelims article is on your front page, and this is industrial output slows to 4.9% in March. Now what we have seen is that India's industrial output growth has actually decelerated to 4.9% in March, which is down from 5.6% in February. This is something that has been reported by the National Statistical Office. Now in this particular scenario, so this is basically what it says, that from 5.6%, now it has dropped down to 4.9%. Now in this context, what we see is that this growth, the growth in March is something which was enhanced by a weak performance of the previous year, and which the output actually, if we look at year on year, that is March 2023 to March 2024, we see that the output has increased by 1.9% compared to March 2023. So March 2023 was not performing well. So that's why compared to that, you might say that March 2024 has done better. But when we compare to Feb 2024, we see that this is where the data has dropped. And notably, when we look at the mining output data, the mining output growth dropped to its lowest in the last 19 months at 1.2%. 1.2%. But when it comes to electricity generation, it saw a significant improvement, and that's why it increased to 8.6%, increasing 8.6% to a contraction that we had seen of almost 1.6% back in March 2023. Now, the economic analysts, they have highlighted a mixed consumption trend, with urban demands have been showing resilience, while when it comes to the rural demands, they have been lagging. And the outlook for the industrial growth in the coming months is very cautious, and also expectations of a slower growth due to the base effect and the previous trends that we have observed here. Now in this context, there are a couple of topics or couple of concepts that you need to know. The first concept here is of index of industrial production. Index of industrial production. So double IP as we call it. Now this is an economic indicator that tries to measure the performance of the industrial sector within a country, and that's why it represents the status of the production in the industrial sector for a given period compared to a reference period. Typically production may be in a base year. So that's why this becomes very, very crucial, because it measures the performance of the industrial sector. So what it does is that it measures the performance of the industrial sector in a country. Now, when it comes to this index of industrial production, it basically covers various sectors, and especially here there are three very, very important sectors: manufacturing, mining and electricity. So one is manufacturing, second is mining, and third is electricity. Alright, manufacturing, mining and electricity. Now each sector might be weighed differently depending on its relative importance in the economy, but we see that when it comes to India, you'll see that manufacturing constitutes 77.6% of this indicator. So that's why it becomes a very, very important index. Now related to this index, there is another index that we should know of, and this index is the index of 8 core industries. Alright, this is called as the index of 8 core industries. Now this is a key economic indicator that tracks the collective performance of the 8 most crucial sectors in an economy. Now these 8 industries, they are considered the backbone of the industrial sector due to their significant impact on the general economic activities, and that's why they are very often seen, you can say, as a barometer for the industrial performance. Now when it comes to these 8 core industries, you have all these industries as listed here. You have coal, electricity, crude oil, cement, natural gas, steel, refinery products and fertilizer. And out of which, if you see, the most important weightage has been given to refinery product and then followed by electricity. There is a question also that was asked in your 2015 prelims examination, where they had given 4 of these and they had asked which of the following has the largest share, largest weightage out of the 8 core sectors. So this was asked in your 2015 paper. So that's why when it comes to these 8 core industries, one thing is that each of these industries, they have a different weightage in the index according to their size and their importance in the economy. For instance, the refinery products and electricity, they, as I told you, they have a higher weightage as compared to the others because they are very, very crucial in the entire industry. So that's why we see that there are all these things that you see as a part of all these indicators. Moving on to the last article of the day, folds and faults. Now this could be a complex article for you, so I'll just try to break down what they have written. This is there on your editorial page, but it's not something that we need for detailed analysis, but rather largely from the prelims perspective. So what you see is that in this context it talks about something called as the protein folding. So we'll try to understand what is protein folding first and then come back to what this article is actually saying. Now we are talking about protein folding. So just understand what is protein folding. Protein folding is the process by which a protein chain acquires its 3-dimensional structure, which is typically a functional form. And this structure is crucial because it determines the protein's function in the body. So now that's why just remember that when we talk about protein folding, understand what is protein folding. Alright, protein folding. So that's why it is basically a process by which a protein chain acquires its 3D structure, 3-dimensional structure, its 3-dimensional structure, which becomes a functional form. All right, and its 3-dimensional structure, and this becomes crucial because the function of the protein is determined by this structure. All right, so this is because and important as it determines protein's function in the body. Now this process is something that is guided by the sequence of the amino acids which are there in the protein chain, and this is something that also dictates how exactly will it fold into a specific shape through various different interactions among its atoms. So understand, I'm just going to bring it down to a very basic level. Just think of all these proteins as string of beads. As you can see in this picture also, just think of it as a string of beads that we have. Alright, and each of these bead is different, and the order in which they are arranged, it also affects how the string will fold. So as you can see here that you have an order in which the amino acids are basically sequenced. So all these are the basic beads. Now, so this string of beads becomes very, very crucial. Then after that we see that the string that is there, the string that has been formed of this bead, the string folds based on how the beads would interact with each other and the environment. For example, some of the beads might be attracted to each other and pull closer, while there might be others which might push away. So there are all these things that are possible. So based on that we'll see that this kind of a helical structure will be formed. What is alpha helix and beta helix? We'll not go into that, it's too technical for you to know, but this is what will happen, and ultimately they start folding from here on. they start folding from here on like this, that all the alpha and the beta structures, that is all these kinds of folds that we have here, they start folding, and ultimately they get into the final shape, which is called as the quaternary shape. The final shape, basically once the string settles into its shape, it can do its job, like let's say helping in digesting food, or fighting infections, or carrying oxygens in the blood. So all these, then the functions will be carried by the proteins. So correct folding of a protein is very vital for its function. Misfolded proteins, they can be dysfunctional, and that's why they are very often also associated with diseases like Alzheimer's or Parkinson's, all these kind of diseases. So understanding and predicting the protein folding is something which is very significant area of research in biochemistry, and that's why it also has very important implications for medicine, especially in terms of biotechnology. So that's why protein folding and understanding of how the proteins fold, how the beads are stringed together, how they are shaping up into something. So all these things becomes important, how they acquire that three-dimensional structure, and the kind of shape that they have, the kind of structure that they have will determine what kind of function they would play in the body. And if let's say they are not folded properly, if some misfolds happen, if there are any misfolds, meaning that they haven't been properly folded into the exact structure they were supposed to be, misfolds can lead to a different types of diseases or problems. Now this is where there is something called as alpha fold. Alpha fold. Now this alpha fold is an advanced artificial intelligence program that has been developed by DeepMind, which is a subsidiary of Google. Now it basically has been designed to predict the three-dimensional structure of the proteins based on their amino acid sequences. So AlphaFold basically is what? It is an AI program. It is an AI program which basically has been created, it has been developed by DeepMind, which is a subsidiary of Google. Now what is the role of this AlphaFold? AlphaFold basically is something that is designed to predict, it will predict the three-dimensional structure, of proteins based on their amino acid sequence. Alright, amino acid sequences. Now the ability of AlphaFold to accurately predict these folds or these structures, it represents a very significant breakthrough in the field of biology and biochemistry. So if you understand, for example, when it comes to AlphaFold, why is AlphaFold important? Because first, it is trying to solve a very complex protein problem. Determining how a protein folds based on solely its sequence of amino acids has been a major challenge in biology for decades, and that's why it has been named as protein folding problem. So that's why it tries to solve this problem. So AlphaFold basically, it uses a deep learning technique, specifically a type of neural network architecture that helps it understand the patterns and the relationships in the large data sets. And it has been trained on vast database of known protein structures, and then it has learned to predict the likely three-dimensional structure of the new protein sequences based on all that training data. And by predicting the protein structures quickly and accurately, AlphaFold is something that can help the scientists to better understand the function of proteins and to facilitate the advancements in fields like drug discovery and understanding of the diseases and so on. So for example, it can accelerate the development of new medications by just predicting how the proteins would interact with the drugs. So that's why in this context AlphaFold becomes important. Now coming to the article, and what the article basically talks about is how we are trying to solve this protein folding problem with AlphaFold. So what we see is that AlphaFold came in 2018, then AlphaFold 2 in 2020. These two are basically systems that predict the protein structure, and that's why they would help us in understanding of the protein configurations. Now in the latest version, which is AlphaFold 3, we see that it is something that can predict the protein shapes and their interactions with nearly 80% accuracy, and also they can model the DNA, RNA and all the ligands and modifications here. So that's why this time they have been able to improve upon the performance of AlphaFold better than the first two versions. The third version is actually able to do a lot better. So that's why this is something which becomes very, very crucial. Now in this context, what we see is that right now AlphaFold is having a very restricted access. Not everybody has the access to it. That's why there is a push for DeepMind to also adopt a more open access model for AlphaFold, so that it can ensure its affordable and availability, and that's why it might be needed for scientific research and medications. So just understand what is protein folding, why protein folding is important, and what is AlphaFold. So these are the things that we have to understand here. Now lastly, coming to the mains questions of the day. The first question: critically analyze India's foreign policy towards Palestine in the light of its broader strategic interests in the Middle East. Discuss how India's stance could influence its relation with other major powers in the region. So you have to understand that first, how you have to write about what India's relation with Palestine has been historically, also how India always has been trying to balance between Israel and Palestine. So write about that, and why it is important, especially for India's interest in West Asia. So write about that as well, why it is important, because how it will then have a better relationships perhaps with all the major powers in West Asia. And then at the same time, this other aspect of Israel, that how does India try and manage Israel also at the same time. So that is what you have to write in this first question. The second question is: critically examine the role of international law, particularly the UN clause, in the exploration and exploitation of subsea freshwater resources. So in this context, you again have to write the importance of freshwater resources, the data, the problem that the world is facing, start with that, and then talk about the international laws and the importance of international laws and how they can help. So the definition of the resource itself or the area itself, all these things should also be included in this answer. So with this, we come to the end of today's session. I hope that this session was helpful for you. Please do like the video, please subscribe to our channel, and be regular with all the initiatives that we have. We'll again meet with the new news analysis back tomorrow. Thank you very much for being here.